Hey, welcome back to Great Sports Debates, and today we hit on running backs on the greatest football players of recent time series. And while the value of the running back position has declined in recent times, the running back is still a defense's best friend, and most of the greatest offenses of all time had a great runner that could at least run out the clock as well as pick up those crucial short yardage situations. And while Jim Brown is on top of most lists of running backs, this list only goes back about 40 years or so. So you're not going to see him as well as guys like, Gale Sayers or O.J. Simpson. Now the running back position is one of the hardest to rank because there's so many factors and so many guys did so many things well. But we're going to lean heavily on our criteria. The top criteria that we will use is the ability to fall forward or always get positive yards, to be a strong short yardage runner, get those crucial short yardage gains, and more importantly, not to have small gains or lost yardages that can kill drives. The next factor is probably most people's number one factor, which is explosive plays. In the NFL, it's always hard to find players that are a threat to score from long distance. Even today, with all the rules to help offense, how often does a non-quarterback have multiple big plays? And that's why teams are always looking to draft electric players. Third will be versatility. How a player can impact the game, catching, blocking, and anything the team needs to win. These factors are almost a necessity in today's game. Production and dominance will also be main factors, which can be measured in numbers as well as success. Let's start with the honorable mentions group that has some great players that will likely upset some, but I'm going to start off by saying right now, guys that were really good and maybe even elite for a few years, like a Frank Gore or Curtis Martin that put up big lifetime numbers, are not going to be on this list. But to start off the guys that did make the honorable mention list, we're going to go with a guy that most people probably have top 5 for sure, and that's LaDainian Tomlinson. LT was a workhorse running back. He didn't typically lose yards and was used in the passing game a lot for his era and did pretty well. He had 2 rushing titles, including some great numbers in 2006 when he won MVP. He had an elite efficiency on his really good teams and was one of the best at getting into the end zone. Yet despite all this, he does only have 3 first-team All-Pro selections. He also has 5 years under 4 yards per carry, which definitely isn't great, compared to 2 years over 5. His early fumble issues and lack of explosive plays compared to the very best keeps him off the main list, but does get him an honorable mention nod. The next honorable mention is Emmitt Smith. Yes, I know, maybe not as talented as some guys that didn't make the list. Yes, he played behind great offensive lines, but the guy played smart and he ran hard and he did what needed to happen for teams to win. Smith had 4 consecutive first-team All-Pros in the middle of one of the strongest running back eras. He had 4 rushing titles. He led the league in yards per game 3 times, all over 106 yards per game. Led the league in touchdowns 4 times, in touches 4 times, in yards per attempt once at 5.3 in 1993. He wasn't asked to catch the ball much, but he did have a good catch percentage despite most of his catches being out of the backfield or in the flats. He made some excellent blocks and would play through pain. Like all backs with 4 or more 365 carry seasons, he started to fall off early. Emmett led the league in yards from scrimmage twice, won the MVP in 1993, and finished top 3 2 other times in the MVP voting. Adrian Peterson is next up with 4 first-team All-Pros and 3 times second team. Peterson led the league in rushing 3 times, yards per game 4 times, including the ridiculous 2012 MVP season, when he averaged 131.1 yards per game average, only behind great seasons by O.J. Simpson, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, and Eric Dickerson. That's pretty much the who's who of running backs. That year was so amazing as he rushed for 2,097 yards, just 8 yards from the record, and was tied for second among 2,000-yard rushers with an insane 6 yards per carry. And all of this was after 2 torn ligaments late the previous year that was supposed to have him miss most of that year. Peterson had some good blocks, but wasn't a great blocker or receiver. His long career hurt some of his averages, but the peak was among the best. Finally, I want to mention 3 players who played at a very elite level, but didn't do it long enough, are still playing, or were limited by injuries, other obligations, or a combination thereof. Terrell Davis, for one, was amazing for a short run when he got his opportunity. Bo Jackson was electric and must-see TV in everything he did, but only played parts of 4 seasons. And Derrick Henry is a guy I like watching almost as much as Bo Jackson. And despite a terrible start to his career, once he figured it out, man, he's probably only a great season or 2 away from being on a list like this. So now let's move to the 3 guys that actually made the list as the greatest running backs of recent time. And we'll start with Walter Payton. Payton was borderline because he doesn't have the peak numbers of some of the other guys. Even some guys, that probably didn't even make the honorable mention list. But he spent his prime on bad teams that let defenses focus on him. I didn't see his 1977 season, but he led the league in rushing, and it was one of 4 times he led the league in carries, and he still averaged 5.5 yards per carry and 132.3 yards per game, which is 3rd all time. Payton is 2nd all time in rushing, was a 5-time first-team All-Pro, and led the league in scrimmage yards twice. He was one of the best receiving running backs of his era, a great blocker, and a great short yardage running back that would always get what you needed, whether it was the first down or the dive over the top touchdowns. He played through injuries and only missed 1 game in his 13-year career. It's unfortunate the Bears didn't get good until the end of his career. Now, if you only had the highlights to look at, Barry Sanders would undoubtedly be number 1. In a very short 10-year career, where he was still playing at an extremely high level when he quit, Barry had over 1,000 yards every year of his 10-year career, even in years where he only played 11 games due to injury. He was a 6-time All-Pro first team, made the Pro Bowl all 10 of his years of his career, and was generally regarded as the best running back every year of his career. Barry led the league in rushing 4 times and could have done so many more times if he chose to, whether it was him sitting out and only needing 10 yards to, win the rushing title because they already clinched the playoffs, to, just not caring multiple times when he easily could have won it, in the last week of the season. In his MVP year, he rushed for 2,053 yards on a 6.1 yards per carry mark, which is higher than anybody else that's ever rushed for 2,000 yards. His last year was one of 2 bad seasons by his standards, but he still ran for 1,491 yards on 4.3 yards per carry on a really bad Lions team that was probably the last straw for Sanders, not looking to do a rebuild at that point. Despite his excellent running ability and unmatched explosive plays, his style led to more negative plays than any running back I can remember. And even with fumbles early in his career, terrible blocking by him, and below average hands, you can't ignore over 1,500 yards from scrimmage 9 of his 10 years, and 2 over 2,150, including 2358 and 97. Now I know everyone is wondering, who is number 1? I know this is unpopular, but hear me out. In 1982, the Rams were 2-7. In 83, they drafted Eric Dickerson and were winning playoff games. Dickerson was a workhorse right off the bat with 390 carries for 1,808 yards. His 113 yards per game was 26th all time, and one of 4 times he had over 112 yards per game, something only done 27 times total by everyone, however many times. All of those numbers are rookie rushing records. Eric finished second in MVP voting again his second year, posting 2,105 rushing yards, still a record today, while again leading the league in yards from scrimmage, yards per game with 131.6, rushing of course, and TDs this year, while improving their record again. After missing part of his 3rd season due to a holdout, in Eric's 4th season he again led the league in rushing with 1,821 yards, 113.8 yards per game, 404 carries, 430 touches, and 2,026 yards from scrimmage, all leading the league. For the 3rd time, he was second in MVP voting. Despite all this, Dickerson's constant search for more money, complaining of problems, led to a Herschel Walker-type trade mid-next season. Yet Dickerson was so good, he raised the lowly Colts, long considered the worst team in the league, from 3-13 to relevance, winning their division, making the playoffs for the first time in over a decade, and the Rams fell to 6-9. Once again, people question if Dickerson only turned it on to get paid after rushing for 1,011 yards in 8 starts for his new team on the Colts, and then returning to lead the league in rushing again the very next season in 1988. By the end of Dickerson's 6th season, he led the league in yards per game 5 times. Rushing, all 4 years he played 16 games. He was also a 5-time first-team All-Pro. Despite helping the Colts make the playoffs for the first time in over a decade, the team was bad and traded its future, leading to things getting ugly pretty quick. In 1998, Dickerson made his last Pro Bowl and only finished 3rd in rushing. Eric started the retirement talk during the end of the season, talking about injuries, and eventually got to the point where he said he wouldn't play for the Colts. He couldn't force another trade, and was now forced to split time, and his production numbers dropped off quickly the following years. But Eric Dickerson's prime, production, and impact is hard to ignore. And probably because of his personality, he's often overlooked. He had speed, power, and explosiveness all at elite levels and is number one on this list. Let me know what I missed in the comments. Like, subscribe, share, and thanks for watching.